All right, welcome guys. Today we are going to be discussing the topic of biblical masculinity and what it actually means to be a man. And this topic doesn't apply just to guys. It's deeply important for women to have a clear concept of this as well, because it relates to relationships, it relates to family interactions, it relates to expectations and interactions across the full spectrum of human experience. So we're going to look at some passages from the Bible. We're going to compare and contrast what the world says versus what God says. And we're going to share any personal experiences we have that could be relevant, good or bad, that we can learn from. And hopefully through the process here, develop a better refined sense of what makes a real man in God's eyes. So to kick things off, let's start with culture. Let's start with, what have we grown up thinking? What have we seen in popular culture, books, music, movies, etc.? What does culture say a man is? And you guys can give anecdotes, or you can just name like adjectives or whatever, however you want to answer that.
Like secular culture or Christian culture?
Secular culture first, then we're going to go to Christian culture.
So those are very different.
Culture. Yeah.
Well, obviously, if we look at movies, songs, what's idolized and portrayed as like cool, like man who makes money, strong, can beat you up, has a great job, has a great car, and can get girls. And that's what most of all the songs are about these days, anyways. You're just nodding at me.
No, I'm nodding because I wrote down some preliminary notes, and you said almost exactly what I said, just in slightly different words.
Sorry.
I said conquest of women, and you said can get girls. For example.
I mean, look at like James Bond, for example, is like the classic iconic like secular version of like the man, like kills all the bad guys, can do all these cool stunts, helicopters, cars, always gets the girl, like rich.
Sure. Okay, so there's a strength there, but we're gonna look at whether that's really strength. But we call it strength. The world calls it strength, and then along with that, it's all of this very flesh-based, money, cars, women, that whole kind of thing. And again, as you guys can no doubt infer, the Bible has some things to say about that as well. Okay, so how about the church? How about Christian culture? I'm not saying the Bible. We're going to get to the Bible. I just mean the church writ large. Is there anything any kind of vibes about how a Christian man is supposed to behave that you guys have inferred or experienced in Christian culture that are not necessarily rooted in the Bible?
Well, I think there's a lot of pressure for men to be leaders, always taking on the lead role.
Like to be the spiritual covering, like the head of the household.
Yeah, right. I mean, they're just, they're number one, and then the wife is number two.
Wives submit to them, just do your job, submit.
Yeah, I mean, Adam is mentioned before Eve. So obviously Adam is number one, Eve is number two, children are number three, and I think that my experience has been that men are supposed to be in leaders and in leadership roles for the most part.
Appreciate that appreciate that comment, Janet, and it brings up some valid points, which I don't have in my outline at this point. Thank you for completely derailing my whole plan. But
You're welcome. I'll be back in 3 weeks.
but they're of great significance. So I think we can take a momentary detour to hit them. You're right. You're right. The church has often Bible thumped the man is the head of the household. Wives, submit to your husbands. All these things, which are difficult because there are verses that say that. But the problem is that there are also verses that say submit to one another out of reverence for Christ, and husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, right? Live with your wives in an understanding way as co-heirs of the grace of life, right? Co-heirs, not one heir greater than the other heir. So there's like the church in the negative sense of kind of controlling patriarchal culture that we're implying here, has at times cherry-picked particular verses in order to justify some of these more negatively hierarchical approaches to relationships. Whereas, in my opinion, what I see biblically is that, yes, the man is the spiritual leader in terms of the man has that role, but that doesn't make him better or more powerful or more loved by God or more important or any of that. Like it's a position, and it also doesn't mean that the woman doesn't have just as much of an equal voice or right to speak, right to talk, right to be heard, right to participate in the decision process. I mean, if we think about the best leaders, the best leader of a team, whether it's in a business context or a sports context, right? The best leaders aren't ones that are just like, my way or the highway, like deal with it, right? The best leaders are the ones that take the inputs of their team members, and they make everyone feel like they're part of this journey and adventure and this shared vision together, right? Those are the leaders that people want to follow. So the church has created at times somewhat of a negative connotation of this, the man as the leader, when really there's a good root there of being, the man as the head, if you will. So Grace, you're smiling like you want to say something.
Well, my joke is that sure, the man can be the head, woman can just be the neck, which controls the head. We're gonna look this way now and this way. Like, it's just for fun.
Yeah.
Can I answer your question?
Please
that you
do.
asked about, like, what we asked about, like the secular culture of manhood and the Christian or the churchy culture of manhood. I was gonna say, like, from what I've seen, in my opinion, like the church culture of what masculinity is the exact opposite, pretty much, of the secular version. So like, secular version, admires wealth, and the church is all like, money is the root of all evil, and it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. And secular masculinity values like getting girls, and like the church is all like, purity and like, all modesty and purity and waiting and chastity. And then, secular masculinity values like strength and being tough and fighting and like, being able to like fight. And the church is all like, turn the other cheek and, be passive basically in a doormat because you'll be a nice guy, so like there's these two like extremes, what I like to call ditches, that people fall into. So, sorry if I'm stealing your thing, Skylar.
No. There's no thing to steal here. This is all open source material. So
because we like to talk about our two ditches all the time. You
well,
can fall into.
It's a very apt metaphor. Joe, welcome. Good to have you, brother.
Joe.
Yeah.
Hey guys, good to see you.
Joe, you haven't missed much. We just started a couple minutes ago. We've been comparing what secular culture says a man is with what Christian culture, not the Bible yet, but Christian culture says a man is. And so far, we kind of identified that secular culture sort of has the James Bond archetype, cool, money, macho, awesome cars, can get girls, very sort of status based, that sort of strong, externally strong vibe. And the church, a lot of times does the opposite, that men are supposed to be, nice guys, and pleasant. And Janet emphasized how the church has often come on too strong with the notion of men being leaders and the head of the household and so forth, to the point that it's become this thing where women are, well, you need to submit and all of this. And we kind of put that, I think, in more of its biblical context, where like the man is the leader, so to speak, but that doesn't mean that the woman is less valuable or less important or doesn't have an equal voice on the team. We talked about how like leadership is a good thing when everyone is part of the team and has a shared vision together. It's only bad when it's a dictatorship. So at any rate, Gracie, yes, you said something there which I had on my list that I wanted to emphasize, and that is that the church culture often tries to make men into nice guys, like you said, into sort of harmless, domesticated guys. And for any of you who have read books like Wild at Heart, or the Barbarian Way, which is one that Joe recommended to me. We went to a church together in Hollywood, where the author of Wild at Heart is the head pastor, or not Wild at Heart, Barbarian Way, a guy named Erwin McManus. And there's Wild at Heart.
Read
Gracie.
it. I've read it like 7
good.
times. It's so good.
Oh, wow.
But as we're going to see, this church culture sort of archetype of the Christian man as sort of a nice, pleasant, harmless guy is really not biblical, and it's kind of emasculated men from being what God has called them to, which is kind of the more kind of rugged, almost dangerous types. And the funny thing is that we may not.
You got lots?
Did you
Welcome,
puke?
Kristen.
Hello.
I'm here.
You know,
You want to know what? The only reason I came on is because Declan privately messaged me. And I was
Wow.
like, Declan has never done that. So here I am.
Wow.
Because I wasn't coming because I'm not in a good headspace. But I'm here.
Well,
what do you know?
hopefully we can help to improve your headspace. So welcome.
Kristen joins the chat when we hear stuff about poop and diapers and wipes.
Oh, is that what was happening? Because that's my life.
I just got puked on.
Did I give you wipes? So listen, my friend Whitney's here. She's over there. She's going to be listening too. So
I'm
Perfect.
getting baby lovin's right now.
baby lovin's.
Baby loving. It's the best kind of loving right there. Okay, so for those of you who just joined, we're discussing biblical masculinity, what makes a man a real man. And so far we have touched on what culture says, what secular culture says, and what Christian culture says. So basically we're going by process of elimination here. We have identified all the things that the world says a man is, but actually isn't. And what we're going to discover is that God says some very interesting things about it. So let's look at the beginning.
Of time.
Janet, could you read Genesis 1:27 for us?
Where's my Bible?
Sure. Genesis 1:27. 1:27, 26. So God created human beings, making them to be like himself. He created them male and female.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So, and again, sometimes the most powerful truth is the simplest thing that's standing in plain sight that we've read 1,000 times and think we understand. But this is really the foundation of this entire concept, entire teaching, is this notion of the image of God, right?
Mhm.
Man and woman, ladies, you aren't off the hook. We're going to talk about you guys next week. But for today, we're focusing specifically on men, just because it's useful to kind of compartmentalize them a little bit.
Let's fix the real
Um,
problem first, then we'll get to then we'll get to the
Yeah,
girls.
yeah, exactly.
Oh, I was
So-
gonna say, you went with the easy one first.
um, so we are created in the image of God. We look like God. Now,
Mhm.
sometimes we interpret that physically and we can get a little bit hung up on, well, does that mean that God is a white bearded guy in the clouds somewhere and all that? And it's like, okay, let's stop that. I mean, maybe, but that's not really helpful for what we're going after here. So when you guys hear that expression that you are made in the image and the likeness of God, what does that mean to you, right? How does that hit in your heart?
Well, for me, it's that I have a loving heart and I care about people. I want the best for them.
Awesome. Awesome. I absolutely refuse to comment on this until someone else does. Sorry.
What was it for me when it says made in the image? It's like we're supposed to be like him, right? Walk with him in Christ. So whatever, somebody posted something the other day on Facebook that said, Lord, let them see you through me. So that kind of hit me hard. When people look at me, I want them to see Christ in me.
Amen.
Mm.
Amen. I like it. Yeah, so absolutely. So the thing that hits me, oh, sorry, Gracie. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, the fact where it says like he created man and woman in his image. So I mean, man and woman are different, obviously. If you haven't noticed, I know that like society's agenda right now is to be like there is no difference between male and female and whatever, and I'm like, okay, but fine. It's like men and women are different for lots of different reasons, which are good, right? And so it's like, okay, so there's something unique about women, something unique about men that reflects the character and personality of God in a way that just a man or just a woman wouldn't capture entirely, you know? So like that always struck me as being really powerful, because growing up, I really struggled with feeling like women were valuable. Like I always kind of felt that like women were subpar to men, just because I mean that's just kind of the narrative that's kind of portrayed. I mean, like, you know, in all the Disney movies, the girl is like locked up in a tower and twiddling her thumbs waiting for the man to rescue her and save her life, and like she can't lift a finger because she might break a nail, you know. And then like there's never been a female president. You know, there's always men. Like women are the ones that are sex trafficked. Women
I don't appreciate you disrespecting Mulan like that.
Okay, all the other ones besides Mulan. Like women are sex trafficked, you know, we were the last demographic to get the right to vote. Like even all over the world, like women are treated like property still, like they can't do stuff without a man like giving them permission, blah 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 blah. You know, people use the phrase like, oh, you did that like a girl, which is an insult, right? No one says, oh, you do that like a girl as a positive thing, right? So like I always kind of just felt like, oh well, girls just aren't as good as guys. And so like I had this mentality of like I have to be just as good as a guy, you know. So like I was like a huge tomboy, like would always challenge guys to arm wrestling contests and push-up contests to beat them. And I would beat them up until about high school. Then the table started turning. But, you know, and like, I was like, that proves that I'm just as valuable as a guy, you know? And like, so I had this idea that like being a woman was bad. Like your emotions are bad. Like being sensitive is bad because you're not strong like a guy, you know? And like Jesus came as a man, you know, God the Father is portrayed as a man. So it's like, what good is even a girl, you know? And when I read Wild at Heart, like amazing, read it, please. So good. I read it like 6 times. It talks about that, like how God, his image is portrayed in both male and female, and how there's something unique that Eve had to say to the world about who God is that Adam couldn't do by himself. And like all the things that like women bring to the table, like how women love to be pursued, right? Like so many times in the Psalms, like God says, search for me and like pursue me, you know, like God wants to be pursued the same way that a woman does, you know, and like over all these different things. And like I started realizing like, oh wow, like when people put down women for, you know, having emotions or being nurturing or whatever, like we're actually putting down part of God's character as well. And like it really like hit me really hard. It's like, wow, like I'm not lesser than, like I share a very important part of like God's character. But anyways, I don't want to totally derail your conversation, Skylar. I kind of took it
You're
into
fine.
womanhood for a second there.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I see. Thank you, Gracie. I see a hand raised from Mr. Joe.
Hi.
Well, that's what that means.
Yes,
I thought he was giving a high five.
no, it's raise hand. You know, the first thing I thought of, Skylar, was that being a person is a big deal. And it reminded me of C.S. Lewis said, you will never meet a mere mortal. So whether it's the crack addicted person on the street or the most annoying person at work, the most annoying person in your family, I mean, that's an eternal being. It's a big, big deal. And each person is, I mean, we could spend 10 minutes. I don't know, Katie. Hi, Katie. We could spend 10 minutes just talking about being in awe of the eternal creature Katie is, Kristen. Of course, Janet, that goes without saying. You know, every single person here, like, it's not just a system of gears and pulleys and cells, and it's something so much more. It's just a vehicle to something absolutely awesome, indescribable.
Amen. It's powerful. I love that, Joe. I love that C.S. Lewis reference.
C.S. Lewis, Man Crush Monday every day.
Crush Monday.
I love him.
So you guys brought up some awesome stuff. I'd like to tie it into another verse here. If one of you champions could bust out Colossians 1:15, that'd be super.
I'm sorry, where are we going?
Colossians 1:15. We went from Genesis to Colossians. Quite an adventure.
I thought you said Janet says. I was like, Janet did read it, yes.
It's the gospel according to Janet.
Do you want me to read it? Are we waiting? What are we doing?
Everyone is waiting for you to read it.
Now I'm going to stutter 7 times. Didn't get my chance to anxiety read it 4 times. My version says, we look at this sun and see the God who cannot be seen. We look at this sun and see God's original purpose in everything he created. For everything, absolutely everything above and below, visible and invisible. Hey, rank after rank after rank of angels, everything got started in him and finds its purpose in him. He was there before any of it came into existence and holds it all together right up to this moment. And when it comes to the church, he organizes and holds it together like a head does a body.
Awesome. That's the message, right?
Mhm.
Cool. Katie, what version of the Bible do you have?
English Standard.
Cool. Can you read your Colossians 1:15?
I'm still trying to get there.
That's all right. No worries.
Almost there. I got to get to 1202. There's so many pages. Okay. What was it? Colossians 1:15?
1:15. Yep.
He is the image of the invisible God, and he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation.
Awesome. So there's that word again. Image. Right? And we all know who he is here, right? Paul is talking specifically about Jesus. And so this is worth noting. This is a big deal, right? That in Genesis, it tells us that we are made in the image of God. We are the image of God. And then tells us here that Jesus is the image of God. So what can we infer from this, right? To use a math analogy.
2 + 2 is 4.
If A looks like B and B looks like C, then A looks like C.
W.
I'm sorry, I didn't take algebra.
So
Get these letters out of here. They don't belong in math.
yeah, so for those of you who have no idea what I just said, and that's okay if math is not your strong suit, the takeaway here is that this is all about Jesus. Surprise, right? Christianity is all about Jesus. Hopefully you were aware of that already. But who we are is intricately tied in who Jesus is, right? So what a man is, what a real man is not what the world says. It's not what Christian culture says. It's not even necessarily what isolated verses here and there in the Bible say, although those do have value and we're going to look at a bunch of them. But really, most importantly, genuine manhood is revealed in Jesus. It's revealed in his character. What's he like? It's very easy for us to know about him, like we would just like I could describe, Joe and say, oh, he lives in LA and he makes films and he likes comedy, right? But that doesn't tell me anything about what he's like as a person, And so to describe Jesus and say, well, he's a good speaker and he, helps people and he has a bunch of followers and walks around and talks about stuff and wears sandals, it's like, okay, great, but what's he like, right? What's he like as a person, his character. So let's do this for a minute. Let's try to fill out as many words as we can, either adjectives or short descriptions, based on our understanding of what is Jesus like.
Hi, Lisa.
By the way, Skylar, what you just described is so I'm on a lot of the dating apps. COVID's my excuse, but I was before COVID. With so many profiles, you'll see people just describing what they like. And so basically they're like, these are my movies, these are my bands, and I'm this hot, and decide. And it's like, who are you? I have no idea who you are. Are you, a generous person? Do you have hospitality? Would you laugh if you saw someone get hit by a bus? Like, who are you?
Yeah.
And no one, it doesn't occur to people to actually say something about who they are. Just like, I guess I'll partner with someone who happens to like the same TV shows and music and similar level of attractiveness.
Yeah, well, if you don't like the
That's
exact
gonna
same
last.
movies that I like, you're gone. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joe. And Lisa, welcome. Great to have you as
Hello.
always. We're, as you probably have inferred or gathered already, we're talking about biblical masculinity, and we've talked about the contrast between what the world says and what the church says, and now we're talking about what God says, and we've hit the fact that we're made in the image of God, and that Jesus is himself the image of the invisible God, like it says in Colossians 1:15. So now we're kind of dialing it in, and we're gonna see how many adjectives or attributes or descriptions we can come up with to describe Jesus. And you guys, if you have a Bible passage to go along with what you're thinking, that's great, but you don't have to have that. You could simply say he's, kind, or whatever words come to mind.
Jesus
Right
is
now?
love.
Jesus is love. No, 10 years from now, Gracie. Yes, right now.
He's
Okay,
compassionate.
I'm gonna put these. I'm gonna put these in adjective form. So I'm gonna say loving, compassionate. I'm gonna write all these down, by the way, and then we're gonna kind of look at them as a list to try to like you see a diamond with all the multifaceted.
Where's that one place? Love is patient, love is kind. If you can't put your partner's name in there, so I guess you could put Jesus's name in there. Jesus is patient, Jesus is kind.
Patient, kind. Okay.
It's the love chapter, Corinthians 13.
I'm not reading it ever. I'm done.
I have a visual representation of adjectives for Jesus. Lion and the
Nice.
lamb, both.
So no, that's useful, Gracie. But can you convert those into adjectives for us?
Did you make those?
Yeah, I did.
That's amazing.
I got, yeah, it's fun.
I would literally buy them, but I have the foot of a giant. So
Oh, words. Yes. Bold. Dignity is a noun. Dignified. There we go. Innocent. Pure. That's the lamb part, in case you're wondering.
He's a forgiver.
Listen, you can have a pure lion. Okay, just saying.
Can you
As
guys
lamb.
hear me?
Yes, we can.
not Scar. Scar
We
was
can hear
not
you,
pure.
Declan.
Okay, I got an adjective. What about rebellious? How do you like that?
Rebellious for Jesus in the sense of rebelling against the established religious hierarchy.
Yes, exactly in that sense. Yeah.
I think that's a good thing to touch on real quick. I feel like there's two ways to really look at the rebellious thing. Like there's rebellious and rebellion for the sake of just being rebellious, which isn't obviously like moral, but there's a rebellion in the case where it's like being willing to stand up for what's right against any cost, like no matter what the inconvenience or the personal cost to you, which that is a moral rebellion, because we don't want to just be like, oh well, rebellion is great, like just be a rebel, F the system.
No. I mean for the sake of justice. Definitely.
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying that
100%.
you were thinking that, but just for anyone listening who might get ideas.
What'd you think? Zealous? Is that what we think of rebellious, Declan?
He's muted.
Muted.
Yeah, zealous is good, Lisa.
What about
Am I allowed to ask what is zealous? Am I allowed to ask that?
No questions allowed.
Zeal is another word for passion. So like zealous kind of means passionate or intense or very focused on a goal or an ideal. It's often used with a little bit of a negative connotation. Like,
can somebody take my zeal away, please?
But at its core, it's not necessarily a bad word. It just is sometimes used that way.
Like motivation, and it can be for good or bad.
Right.
The zealots in Jesus' time were like these crazy religious people, but then new zealots became good people.
Right.
The old zealots were bad, were like crazy religious people.
Okay, so so far we have loving, compassionate, patient, kind, bold, dignified, innocent, pure, and zealous / rebellious, with the caveat that that's like against the religious hierarchy, so it's in a good context. What else? What else? You're standing there with Jesus. You're walking through first century Mesopotamia with him, watching him talk to people, heal them, minister to them. Are there any other
He's
words?
powerful.
Powerful. Hmm.
How would you put servant? How would you?
Unselfish.
Unselfish.
Selfish.
Confident, but not arrogant.
Holy.
I would say magnifying of the truth. Magnify the truth. Everybody's looking at me like I'm crazy right now, but that's the word that Jesus gave me to tell y'all.
I'm not looking at you like you're crazy.
Kristen,
you-
I like you.
You said that, and
You
said that, and I thought I saw Jesus with like a magnifying glass, you know, like Inspector
No, that's
Clouseau or
Declan.
something.
Sorry, that's
I'm like,
Declan.
You're so magnifying.
Illuminating. How about illuminating? Is that better?
Inspiring.
Here's one.
Unchanging.
Kyler,
Unchanging.
Romantic.
Woo!
Preach.
Whoop, 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 whoop.
Let's
nice.
hear it.
Where did that come from? Where did we get that?
Yeah. Yeah. This is really good.
Well, okay. You know, we all think sunset on the beach, super romantic, roses and like whatever. Well, God invented that. You know, like roses was his idea, like sunsets were his idea. So like romance only exists because he made it exist. So that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, wait, what was that romance you're talking about?
Yeah, Jesus is romantic.
Yeah, I believe that. But I believe that now, but you know, I mean, when I was a teenager and I first had even when I first had sex, I thought it was me that invented the whole thing. You know what I mean? I mean, it wasn't. No, but I mean, it wasn't talked about at church, you know, and stuff like that. But
Dude,
this is
that's so funny because there's a song that goes like, "You think that I invented sex," like the guy singing it, like, and I'm like, sorry, bro, you did not invent it. That'd be God, but nice try. Sorry, go ahead.
no, but I actually this is part of masculinity too. I mean, all of that. It wasn't talked about in my upbringing. I mean, okay, there was a certain amount of, you know, at school. I don't know, you know, the penis has to meet the vagina, and
Stop
the
it,
egg
Declan.
is
Stop it.
inseminated in
Stop
such
it.
and such a
No.
fashion. I mean, what good is that? That doesn't tell you about the emotions and the.
Well, I'm gonna be with Declan here, and I've never heard Jesus be called romantic until today. So, but I'm not doing penises and vaginas and insemination. That's what we're not doing.
No, but you see, the reason I brought up the topic of masculinity, that is actually part of it. Like none of that, nothing was spoken about when I was growing up. You know, like when it came to sex or masturbation or anything like that, I got to be careful. There's people around it. I thought I invented it. I didn't know that. I thought you guys were all going to church and I was doing that. You know.
So funny. Janet's just looking at us like, these darn kids.
I was just gonna say, when I grew up, it was sex, don't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
You'll get pregnant and die.
So no, this is a good point though. Like the fact that you know, two folks here in the Bible study have
What?
the word romantic was thrown out there, and then two people were kind of like, I don't know if I've ever really thought of him that way. Like that's good. That's good. This is what we want. We want like attributes of Jesus to come to the surface that we're like, wait, what? It really? And so like,
Skylar, sorry. What about charismatic? But again, in a good way. I don't mean it. I mean in the good connotation now. Charismatic.
absolutely,
You know,
Declan. Yeah,
yeah.
not in the
That's
not in the
similar
sense of like,
to zealous. Yeah, that's along the same
Yep.
lines.
Yeah.
Gracie.
You have to be careful.
Declan,
Like the people that stormed the Capitol 3 months ago were zealots and were charismatic. So you can be a terrible zealot. You can be a great zealot.
Right.
Yeah, and charisma can be used in a bad way as well. Yeah. But I'm thinking, I'm thinking that if I met him, something would have arrested my attention, that kind of a way,
Yeah. Gracie.
Okay, so I just wanted to touch on the romantic thing again before we move on, because like I never thought of like my relationship with God being romantic either, because that was like weird. I'm like, I'm not gonna be in like a romantic relationship with Jesus. That's weird. All right, but like we actually notice like the Bible is full of like this romantic language. I mean, like barring the whole book of Song of Solomon, which is like a metaphor for like Jesus and like, coming after his bride, which okay, but like we're the church is called the bride. He's returning for the bride. Like, but there's this one of my favorite verses in Colossians, which we're in. I just want to read it really quick. Colossians 1:13. We've just read 15, but a few verses back it says, "For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves." And like y'all know I'm a Disney princess fan. And so like when I read that verse, like I literally just see like a Disney movie. Like he has rescued us like the knight in shining armor from like the witch's tower, the dominion of darkness, and brought us into his kingdom. And I'm like, dude, that's romantic right there. Like I have it all underlined and like I drew a little castle in the corner. But like, like it's like all of the great stories that we love and see and hear like are all just copies and echoes of the great story of like Jesus coming and slaying the dragon, like Satan, to rescue us and save us so we can live with him forever. Like that's literally like every Disney movie in a nutshell. So anyways, this rant over and complete.
Yeah. No, it's really good. And that's an example of reading in like reading the text with the purpose of encountering the heart of God instead of just acquiring theological knowledge, right? Because there's a difference between being able to say like, oh yeah, God transferred me out of the domain of darkness, being like, no, God came after me with like the romantic, like pursuing, rescuing heart.
On a white horse.
On a white horse. He literally is described as the rider on the white horse, by the way.
In Revelation.
Yep. So this the very thing that like makes girls swoon about Disney princes, I mean, is Disney didn't come first, right? Jesus came first.
All the swoonage happening.
So all of these archetypes, these things that move our hearts in popular culture and movies and books and all these things, like they have as their like deepest point of origin God himself. So it's not like we have all these great ideas about nobility and love and romance that are like at the center stage and Jesus is off on the side somewhere. It's like, no, Jesus is the center. He's the center point. He's the foundation. He's the chief cornerstone of all of it. And then these things that we've learned and seen and cherished in various ways in our lives are actually like types and shadows and mirrors and reflections of him. So he absolutely is romantic. He absolutely is that way. Now, yeah, we don't see him, buying flowers and a Valentine's Day card for anybody in the Bible, right? But we can tell the way that he loves people, the way that he's tender with people, that he has intense charisma. You're absolutely right, Declan. I love the way you said that something would have arrested me, right? And that's what happened. Joe offered that for anyone that hasn't seen the chat. Joe cited Luke 24:32, which is an incredible moment in the road to Emmaus, where Jesus appears to a couple of disciples. That's after he had risen from the dead, and after they had encountered him, then they turned to one another and they said, were our hearts not burning within us when he was speaking to us? There's something about him that just makes you come alive. So this is awesome, guys. There's some really good stuff here. So far, we have, you know what? Sure,
Miss
fine.
Bondurant has
Didn't
one.
want to read my list anyway. So go ahead.
I just want to do one more thing about this romance thing, and then we can move on.
It's fine. What you got? Go
No,
ahead.
one more.
Okay, me and Lisa, and then you can move on.
You're fine.
This is
Continue.
our show now, okay, Skylar? Okay, so I had this one really crazy, like, you know, like God sometimes speaks to me in my head or whatever. So I was like sitting on the couch and just chilling, and God asked me, he's like, what's the most romantic thing you can think of that a guy can do for a girl? And I was like, ooh, I like this question. So I started thinking, I'm like, you know, obviously it involves flowers, it involves Valentine's Day, it involves like horses and beaches and sunsets. And I'm thinking of all this, you know, and, you know, God's like, okay, cool, that's awesome. But like, you know, how about a man that like, you know, comes and rescues you and gives his life for you so that you can be with him forever? And I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. And he's like, so, and he's like, Grace. I'm like, what? And he's like, so like, we're not talking about a man in theory being willing to do that for you someday. We're like talking about like an actual man who's already done that for you, like to show his love for you. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, Jesus. He's like, Jesus like already like slayed the dragon, was willing to die for you so that like you could be together. And I was like, wait. And he's like, yeah, like the most romantic thing you can think of, like it's not in theory, like you hope that some man will do this for you someday. Like a man's already done this for you, like it's already happened. It's not that he would do it, but like he did. And I was like mind blown. I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah, that was really cool. And now to Lisa.
Well, Declan, it was probably like 3 years ago. I'm at like a revival group, at a group of a sort of thing. And the leader had asked us, okay, I want you to go take a few minutes to be quiet and ask the Lord who he needs to be for you today. And the first thought that came into my mind was lover. And I was so embarrassed, like I got bright red because I'd never looked at God, Jesus, in that way. And I went up and I even whispered into the leader's ear. I said, I don't know if this is appropriate or not. Serious. I said, I don't know if that's appropriate or not. And she goes, Lisa, no. And then we did this like quick little study on love. And I was literally just blown away.
Yes.
Amazing. So, I mean, this is really significant. We haven't even gotten here in a little bit. We'll get to the relationship section of this discussion, right? But this actually ties to it because it brings up a valid point. Like men, for us, right? The way that we conduct ourselves in romantic endeavors and relationships, like Jesus is the archetype for that too. Like it's not like, well, we should sort of vaguely be associated with him. No, he is the image, right? We should represent him in the way that we conduct ourselves. And ladies, right? The type of man that you look for, the attributes that you look for in a man should be mirroring Jesus. They should be mirroring this unselfishness, this boldness, this purity, this innocence, the compassion, the holiness, all of this stuff. I mean, obviously, you know, you can raise the objection like, well, I'm never going to find all of this in someone other than Jesus himself. Like, okay, fine, but we don't need to get into that. Like, yes, we're all growing up into the measure of the fullness of the stature of Christ, right? But this is your blueprint. This is what you should be looking for, as many of these as you can find, instead of, you know, huge bank account, flashy car, cool job, all of that kind of stuff, right? Instead of nice guy. Not that guys can't be nice, but if that's the high point of their character, they're probably missing quite a bit. A couple other things that I had, and again, if y'all have a few others, feel free to let me know and I'll write them down. But a couple that I had written down were unafraid.
Bless you.
that he fought the right battles.
Mm.
You know, because that's one of the things that I'm sure we can all relate to. We've at times gotten sucked into things and then realize after the fact, like, that was the dumbest thing ever. Why did I make a big deal out of that? And then other times we realize, like, oh, I should have stepped in there. I should have spoke up in that moment, you know. And you look through Jesus' life, and there were times where, like, they wanted to, you know, throttle him, and he just sort of slipped through the crowd. You know, he didn't fight them there. There were times where the religious leaders were super critical, and he just had some kind of a witty retort, and other times where he just went after him and laid it on, you know, thick. And so he was very, very discerning about moment by moment how to respond to each person and which battles to fight. So I think that's a huge part of it as well. And then one which nobody mentioned, that's also super important, intimacy with the Father. He prioritized alone time with God. I mean, that's, like, no joke, biblical. We see the gospel writers say that he withdrew to desolate places on his own to pray. This is the Son of God, right? The second person of the Trinity prioritizing intimacy with the Father. So this is, it's big. It's really big. So I will share this list here in a little bit, but okay. So now we've
Joe is raising his hand.
he is raising his hand. Mr. Joe, what you got? Thanks, Gracie.
So the discussion made me think of toxic masculinity. I think one of the reasons why you know, Lisa was uncomfortable with the idea of lover, and it was shocking when I suggested romance, is because of toxic masculinity and the perversion of what was something so good. And something much better I was going to share, and I forgot about it. Write it down next time. It's like 3 minutes ago.
You're a little young for dementia, Joe.
Come back to me.
No worries, Joe. You're fine. Okay, so Jesus is the archetype. He's the image, he's the goal, he's the source, right? And if you're not sure about this, I actually mentioned a passage a second ago in Ephesians 4 that we're going to go ahead and read right now, actually, just to see that this is 100% biblical. So I'll read this one. This is Ephesians 4, 11 to 16. Paul's talking about unity in the body of Christ. It's a longer passage. I'm going to kind of slim it down to just what relates to what we're talking about. So he says, he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith, the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the fullness of the stature of Christ, so that we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves, and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness in deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him, who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. So obviously this passage is talking about the body of Christ as a whole, encompassing men and women. But this is useful. It's useful and relates to manhood because Paul literally uses the word mature manhood and the measure of the fullness of the stature of Christ. So there's, not only does this drive home Jesus as the archetype, but it also offers some kind of specific examples here in the text. Joe, do you have your hand re-raised, or is
Yes,
that still
it's re-raised.
it's re-raised? Okay.
I was trying to export a video project, and I have the multitasking ability of a bumblebee. So the other day in cinematography class, we were studying different versions of the show Grease for production design, and I totally forgot this line was in there. It's a fun show, John Travolta and all. And they redid it a few years ago live on ABC, I think. But there's this line that says he's bragging about his date, and he said, and the guy asks, "Did she put up a fight?" And I'm like, "Wait, what? What now? What the what now?" Like it's so inappropriate and such a horrible way to think about. That's in the song. That's in the most famous song from Greece. Did she put up a fight? And you know,
Tell me more, tell me more.
That's the one. And
You put up
just
a
like
fight.
the song "Baby It's Cold Outside" has basically been canceled, and I think it's
It's been canceled.
fine. That's the most rapey Christmas song ever written. But it's like such a perversion of, and by the way, like why would someone brag about that? I mean, what's more courageous, to try to do what everyone is trying to do, what's so impulsive, or to do what's actually courageous and in someone's best interest and going against the baser impulses? So, you know, like his friend, instead of saying, "Did she put up a fight?" you know, should have said, "Were you a gentleman? Did you sweep her off her feet? You know, did you give her the time of her life?" I mean, you know, someone would need to work on those lyrics, but better song. But that's what I was saying earlier. That's why we've become so uncomfortable, because there's such a tarnishing of this good stuff that God created, that we flinch when we think about all of it, unfortunately.
It's really good, Joe. And I think, you know, the theme, that if there's a theme for this Bible study, it's, you know, it's the contrast between the worldly archetype of man and Jesus, the biblical archetype. And we're going to see that the contrast is intense. It's not like they're sort of related. It's like they're completely different people. Thank you for that. It's a really good example. And let's look at passage. Joe, you and I have looked at this passage. You guys have all probably heard particular sections of this. This is in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse, let's do 9 through 12. Again, it's a broader discussion. Timothy, both books in Timothy are tremendous on this topic of manhood, because Paul is writing to Timothy, and it's all this kind of life advice about how to be a man of God, how to minister, all this. So it's a lot of it is deeply related to manhood. We're just going to zero in on a couple of passages. Awesome. Really well said. Joe said, so much about living the Christian life and living for Jesus is reclaiming what was good and has been tarnished, like masculinity, romance, beauty, and more. That's awesome. Gracie, would you like to read? I don't think we've heard from you in a specific Bible reading yet. Would you like to read 1 Timothy 6, 9 through 12?
Yes, 1 Timothy 6, 9 through 12. Those who want to get rich fall in temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from faith and pierced themselves with many griefs.
That was the first half of it.
Oh, sorry. I can't math, apparently. But you, man of God, flee from all of this and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. Fight the good fight of faith. Heard that somewhere. Take hold of the eternal life to which you were called when you made your good confession in the presence of many witnesses.
Awesome. What kind of a contrast do we see here in this passage?
Don't find your value to don't be tempted to find your value in like money and possessions, but to look for it in your character of righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, gentleness.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. It's not a trick question, but it's noteworthy because this is exactly at odds with the things that we said in the very beginning that culture says define a man, right? Being wealthy, cool car, right? Gets the girl, all that kind of stuff is rooted in this kind of this love of money, this love of possessions. There's another passage actually that I just thought of along those lines. In, I want to say 1 John. Yep, 1 John. I'll read this one because I just thought of this. I don't have it in my notes. This is 1 John chapter 2, verse 15. It says, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world." So this is again showing us that powerful contrast between the desire for worldly things and the desire for godly things. And it's insightful that Paul specifically, as I was an English student, as some of you were as well. And so, the fact that Paul specifically uses the phrase, "Oh, man of God," draws attention to the fact that these things are defining about being a man of God, right? Fleeing the things he had just mentioned and then pursuing these other things. Joe, at one point, you used the expression, we were talking about purity. You said it's not a line that you draw, it's a direction you run. And it's a powerful, powerful phrase. And it's 100% consistent with this, right? Paul's saying, run away from these other things and run towards these things: righteousness, godliness, faith, love, steadfastness, gentleness. So these are huge biblical characteristics of manhood.
Can I just say some? I was just going to say real quick. I mean, I agree with you that Jesus is the ultimate archetype. However, this is me looking at it now, and with the ability to see things, and for us to discuss and have all our insights and input is very valuable. But for many years, this kind of discussion was not available to me, and I had immense problems with well, I mean, Skyler, you hit on it from the beginning with the two ditches. So I'd go between one ditch and the other ditch. On the one hand, being a doormat, and on the other hand, putting my foot in everybody's ass because they're getting on my nerves. And I have both ways with me. You know what I mean? And so for many years, that's how it was. Very very difficult, particularly growing up for me. There was a lot of you there? There was a lot of there was some confrontational environments. I didn't know what I know now and what we're discussing now. The information was not there. But the place I'm at now is one where I do think Jesus is the ultimate archetype, and I value kindness and I value compassion. I understand when I exhibit those things, not everybody values it, but still I value it myself. And and I have reached a place where I can draw a line a little bit where I don't get used like a doormat. I mean, nobody wants that, you know. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Declan. Joe, is your hand still raised, or is that a residual?
I wish that the thing lowered it automatically.
No worries. So we touched on this. Go ahead, Gracie. What you got?
I was gonna say two things really fast. Just want to just emphasize that they're not saying that money or having money is bad, right? Like Jesus often says, like he wants us to have an abundant life, you know, and like to have resources to be able to like do things like ministry or whatever. But it's like it's using money as like a cover up for a lack of character, or like pursuing money and wealth rather than pursuing character, or like, well, I don't have to be a nice person, I'll just have a lot of money. Like using it as like a compensating for a lack of character is what he's talking about. And I didn't know what direction you were just about to go, so I'm sorry if this like derails it, but I did have a question that if you want to wait till later, that's cool. But my question is like, okay, so we're talking about masculinity, wonderful, awesome, but like, why do we care? Like, what effects does it have in our life when we have, even for women, like if I have a distorted view of what I think a man is, like what are the consequences of that? Like how's that going to manifest in my life? Like how is it going to affect me, like as a woman? Because I mean, you guys can speak for men as well, but like if I have this idea of what a man is, how is that going to affect my life? Or how my dad was, or how my brother was, or how boyfriends have treated me? How does that affect how I think a man should be? Like all of that. So sorry if you were going a different direction.
Well, actually, I think that's very valid, Gracie. It could be very problematic. I mean, you know, I grew up thinking that I should be very nice to women and all the rest of it. And I had this girlfriend one time. She said, look, when you instead of you asking me all the time what restaurant I want to go to, I want you to come in the house. I want you to say, this is what we're doing tonight. We're going to get this kind of food. We're going to watch this. I want you to be a man. I want you to lay it down. We're going to watch this movie. This is the... And so the next day I came home, I said, let's go and have Chinese food. She said, no, I don't like, well, it's all right, Indian food. Then no, not Indian. Well, how about Mexican? No, we're coming, and we're going to watch stuff. No. So it's very difficult to get it right. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure there's things for women that's difficult to get right too, you know?
That's awesome, Declan. Thank you for that. I think we can all relate to that on multiple levels.
Declan, I think you should start your TikTok channel with that story.
Yeah.
There is a little nugget of truth in there, Declan. Like it is hot, I guess, when a guy like takes charge, like, and not in a controlling, bossy way, but like in a, yeah, like I'm not gonna be a whamsly pamsly man, like, oh, what do you want? But like, be like, hey, I planned this, I like, you know, I put this together, and it's like, oh, he took charge and initiative, like that's like hot, you know, like, but not being like overbearing and over controlling, like, well, I don't care what you want, this is what we're doing, you know. So like there is like a nugget of like yes to what you said. So
yeah, but she doesn't want to do it anyway. So
I'm just telling you, I can't speak for her. What'd you say, Katie?
I said that sounds like a personal problem on her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be
I mean,
my husband
I mean,
Corey
just
came home, "Hey, we're doing this," and I'd be like, awesome. Stop asking me what I want to do because I'm so tired of thinking all the time.
Like, I don't always want to be the one to think. Me, Chris, and Katie are like, amen. That's funny.
Think all day really hard. I don't want to come home and be like, oh, now I have to think about what food I want. No, just tell me what we're eating because I'm hungry.
Just stuff cheese in my mouth and tell me I'm pretty, gosh darn it.
Seriously.
oh, that's great. That's great. That's good. Yeah, and we can hit some more on that relationship stuff. Really, that's I think, Gracie, that's where you're going with that question. Is that you know, who, for men, what we think a real man is, that's that's going to be what we kind of aim at and try to project towards women to attract them, right?
Tracy asked me
And-
last week, and then when they were there in line, he said, you know, I'm not paying for you.
Kristen, you
They're
have
talking
a
about
question?
his-
I have a question. Yeah. So I guess maybe I kind of started like a little bit late and I might have missed this part, but like from a man's perspective, because I've had a very bad day today, what
Watch out.
do you consider a man? What do you consider is a good man? Like just summarize it. You can brief it. You know what I'm saying? A good Christian, godly man that pays for lunch dates.
Well, Kristen, I would simply refer you to the list that I just posted, the things that we covered, right? Like the description for Jesus, that's the description for a godly man, right? Now, it sounds like you had a bit of a bad experience today, and I'm sorry for that. I mean, really, I mean it. Like that's not cool. Personal opinion for me, and I think probably the men can chime in as well. That, I mean, unless a woman very, very specifically says, you know, I got this one, or I want to split this one, right? The assumption, if there's any kind of a romantic vibe, pre-romantic, post-romantic, whatever situation, children, yes, all of that, the above, is that the man gets it. I mean, that's just kind of courtesy, you know? So
I've even had guy friends that had no romantic interest whatsoever just offer to pay for me, like out of like a brotherly,
yeah,
you know, it's very touching, you know, because like, hey, it's a kind of a symbol of like, hey, I'm here for you, I've got you, like, you know,
right,
not I'm trying to obligate you to feel like you owe me later, you know what I mean?
right, yeah. So I mean, and that falls under. I mean, we could pin that onto a bunch of these attributes in the chat. We could pin that onto kind. We could pin it onto
Romantic.
Unselfish. Yeah, romantic, unselfish, a whole bunch of things, you know. So, yeah, generous. Absolutely. There's another attribute of Jesus, generous, you know. Absolutely. There's another passage that I would like to highlight. This brings up a great point. So this relates to, as a man, or as a woman who knows a man, who we have this idea, this archetype now of what makes a man in God's eyes, biblically, the image of Christ, etc. What happens if we fail big time, right? What happens if we fall on our face and like, not just like we're trying and we're not doing that great, but like have an epic failure, right? And you guys probably can think of the example that I'm going to go for, but let's just look at a couple passages here. So specifically, Acts 13:22. This is part of a larger description where I think it's Paul or one of the apostles is kind of giving this summary, they're preaching on kind of the history of the Hebrews and all the things that happened. And then he is quoting from Psalms, actually, but he's describing David. He says, I have found in David, the son of Jesse, a man after my heart who will do all my will. Right? A man after, this is God talking. And it refers to Psalms. It also refers to 1 Samuel. And so just to drive home a point, because this is significant here. 1 Samuel 13:14. I'm just going to hit this so that we can keep moving here. But here we go. 1 Samuel 13:14. And this is the Lord talking to Saul through Samuel. He says, your kingdom shall not continue, right? Because Saul disobeyed God. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. The Lord has commanded him to be prince over his people, etc. So God described David as a man after his heart. And he said, this guy will do all my will. And this is before David became king. Now, does everyone know David's great moral failure? I assume that we all do.
Bathsheba.
Bathsheba. Katie, I saw a head shake. That's okay. That's totally okay. That's why I asked. There's no shame in that. Like, nobody knows the entire Bible. I guarantee you I do.
I know every detail of everything in the Bible.
You used to be teaching, Grace.
I'm totally kidding.
So we can just a quick summary. Would someone like to quickly summarize what happened with David and Bathsheba?
He had his servant killed in order to get with her.
Yeah, so they were King David and his armies were at war, and rather than going out to war like the king is supposed to, like the king is supposed to be like with his soldiers at war, but his first failure was not going to war with his men. He stayed at home, and while he was at home, he was out on the rooftop just pacing, and he looked over and saw this lady taking a bath, and so he like saw her, all sexified, and he's like, ooh, who's that? I want her. So he had her brought to him, slept with her, got her pregnant, found out, oh shoot, she's the wife of my friend who's actually one of my mighty warriors that's in battle right now. So let's bring him back home from the battle and try to get him to sleep with his wife so that he'll think that he got her pregnant and not somebody else. But when he refused to do it, he had his one of his best friends killed so that he wouldn't find out that he slept with his wife. And then he's like, oh shoot, I done messed up.
So it's the original Jody. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He's like, I done messed up, AA Ron.
Yeah.
That's the original Jody right there. My goodness.
Yeah. So it's bad, right? It's bad. But again, this is a man who God described as a man after his heart. Now, did any of this surprise God? Is God surprised by events that happen? Obviously not. Right? So God knew, he knew exactly how David was going to fail and still called him a man after my heart. And there's another thing I'd like to zero in on about this. And this is a powerful moment. It's worth reading. We're not going to read the whole story, but it's in 2 Samuel 12:13. And this is when God sends the prophet Nathan.
This is my mom.
Hi, Mrs. Kristen's mom.
Hi, Kristen's mom.
It's Patty. Sorry.
So God sends the prophet Nathan to rebuke David. And he tells this parable, and David gets all mad at the guy in the parable. And then Nathan says, you're the guy. Like, you did the thing that you're mad about this other guy doing in the story. And then David realizes it. Right. So this is in 2 Samuel 12:13. And again, I'm just going to quickly read this because it's just a short passage. But David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. I have sinned against the Lord. David acknowledged it. And then note this. Nathan said to David, the next breath, the Lord also has put away your sin. You shall not die. Now he goes on and talks about some of the consequences that are going to come because of what David did. But isn't that noteworthy? Like, this incredible transgression, like catastrophic moral transgression, murder and adultery. I mean, those are pretty high on the list of things that we would consider like you can't come back from that. Like, you done messed up, right?
You done messed up, AA Ron.
And yet David confesses his sin, and immediately, like the next breath, the prophet of the Lord says, the Lord has put away your sin. Translation, right? Kind of Old Testament language there, but translation, you are forgiven. Your sin is forgiven. That's what put away, taken away, like removed from you, means forgiven. So that's a powerful word right there for anyone that's ever wondered if maybe God forgives them, right? First of all, we have the blood of Jesus shed on our account, which David didn't have. David was under the law. So we have Jesus, so we can be even more confident. But secondly, we know the heart of God for us, right? We know that God doesn't withhold. He's not like trying to get us to earn forgiveness somehow, right? The second we come to him, it's offered. Boom, complete. So can a man of God make a mistake and still be a man of God?
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, being a person or man or woman after God's own heart doesn't mean in order to be a person after God's own heart, you can never mess up, right? Because that's not possible. Like if that were possible, then Jesus wouldn't have had to come and we could have just done it on our own, right? But like being a man or woman after God's own heart just means like when you do mess up, what's your response? Like there's a verse in Proverbs that says the righteous fall 7 times. And like that really got me because I was like, wait a second, the righteous fall 7 times, but they get back up, right? So like when a wicked person falls, they just stay there and they just keep doing what they're doing because they like it. They don't have any intention of stopping. So like in actuality, the righteous actually fall more often than the wicked do, because in order to fall, you have to be standing, right? So like you have to be standing and walking towards God in order to fall, because if you're just laying on the floor and rolling around, that's not falling, you're just laying in sin, right? So like being a person after God's own heart doesn't mean you never mess up. It's just, what do you do when you do mess up? What's your response? Like, do you go towards God and like, accept his forgiveness and be like, hey, like I'm done messed up, sorry, like thank you for loving me? Or do you just stay where you're at and turn away? Like that's really what it is how do you respond when you do? So.
Yeah, Gracie, you make a very good point when you say the righteous fall more than, I mean, because the other people, how far do they have to fall anyway? I mean, they're already, so yeah, the righteous, I like that. But also, I love the example you gave, Skylar, because for me, that particular sin with David, well, the two of them, the murder and the adultery, I mean, to me, it just seems so egregious that, like, that you're screwed, I mean, I always struggled also with it ties into something else, and I'll just mention it because it's part of a man thing. I mean, I always had a huge amount of problem with what I can't remember the specific thing that Jesus says, but I mean I live in New York City, so I'll be walking down the street. There's women everywhere. I mean I can't help. I try not to look. You understand what I'm saying? I mean I try not to be attracted. I try not to be looking, but it's all over the place. I can't help it. Yeah, I mean even for years ago, I used to say to myself, maybe I'm supposed to cut my eye out because it says that in the Bible too. I mean I really struggled with some of this. I mean I just can't help it. And so it shows that my heart is committing adultery, even I don't know, many times a day. I'm sorry to say, but
Well, Declan, quick question for you. Being tempted is different than committing adultery several times a day. Remember last week we talked about temptation.
No, but in my heart, I'm just I might desire another woman or something.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If in your mind you're like, yeah, I actually agree with that, I would go sleep with that person if I had the opportunity. That's different than being like, oh wow, that's a beautiful woman and I'm attracted to her. Like attraction is not a sin. Like we were made to like appreciate beauty and be attracted. Like God gave us a sex drive, right? So like having a temptation is not sin. Like Jesus was tempted in all ways and without sin. Yeah. It says in all ways. So I'm sure Jesus looked at some women like, wow, they're hot. Because he was tempted in all ways that we are. So having an attraction towards someone is not a sin. It's when you agree and be like, you know what? Like if I had the chance, I would do that. That's when you've made the agreement that like, hey, yeah, that's like you've agreed that you would do that thing. That's when it becomes a sin. Not having
My mom said it's the lust that's the sin.
Right.
Yeah, but Gracie, 2,000 years ago, did they have spandex?
They probably did.
Wait, Declan.
I think the Romans dressed pretty what is it, provocative.
What'd you say?
No, I mean,
I said the Romans dressed pretty provocative.
Yeah.
This is
Kind of
actually
the
really valid. I mean, we're making some, talking in jest to some degree here, but this is actually very significant both for men and for a relationship dynamic between a man and a woman. Like, there are attractive people in the world, right? There are men and women that look good. Like, this is an objective fact, right? And so, like, there's no sense sticking our head in the sands and being like, I can never, gaze my eyes upon any other human lest I commit, this sin. And we need to realize, like when Jesus said, anytime you look at a woman lustfully, you've committed adultery in your heart. Like Patty clarified there, Kristen, you're making a face, but like, it's about the lust, right? That's the point, right? It's about lust. He didn't say anytime you look at a woman. He said anytime you look at a woman lustfully. So there's a difference, Declan, and for us men in particular, and women actually, because I know there are so many super hot guys in the world as well, right? There's a difference between saying, like, man, she looks really nice. He looks really nice. So that's a sharp looking guy. That's a great looking gal, right? Man, God, you made that person really, really well. That's awesome. There's a difference between, like, kind of essentially honoring them in your mind by acknowledging the fact that they look good.
Well, think of your animals. That cardinal, the male cardinal, more beautiful than the female, is attractive and trying to take the woman. Okay, so we're made to have one mate. Okay, but God made that male cardinal beautiful so that female would look at it.
Well, Kristen, I try not to lust after the animals, though. I draw a line there.
Thanks, Declan.
Don't last after the animals. But think of the female cardinal is not the bright red cardinal. Okay, the female bluebird is not the bright red blue. The bright bluebird. But God made them attractive.
What's that?
He made that on purpose because we are
Maddie, will you get those
a
ones?
visual people. But like I said, the lust is the sin. But you have to realize that God made us beautiful people, and you're going to have that temptation. So she was, I don't know who's in the upper corner there, Kristen, but she was saying, temptation is going to be there. You have to know that when you fall, you will get up because God is there to forgive you. What we do as a human being, because we are still just a human being, is beat ourselves up over and over and over because we continue to do the same. So with a group like this, you can separate yourself from the temptation and you can turn your back from the temptation, but it's going to be there again tomorrow. But you also know that God is going to be there.
So good. Kristen, while you talk just like your mom,
Oh,
like, I can almost not tell the difference between you guys' voices.
We don't hear it, but
Declan, I just want to say one more thing to you. There's also a difference between going about your business, minding your own business, living your life, and like someone attractive walks by, like, you didn't ask for that, right? Like, that just happened, versus like going home and like purposely sneaking on your computer and like actively pursuing looking up like pornographic images, right? There's a completely different like intention and motivation there. Like, like, God's not going to fault you if a naked woman runs by and you get turned on by that. It's like, that wasn't your fault. Like, that happened, right? But like, it becomes your intention when you like go home and start looking up that stuff. So like, there's a difference there also.
No, you're right. I'm minding my own business completely. Just goes on around me. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, back to your point, Skylar.
No, you guys crushed it. Yeah, I was making that distinction, but you guys covered it. I'm not gonna rehash that. I would like to draw our attention to another passage which highlights this contrast between what the world says and what God says. And this doesn't specifically say men, but it applies obviously to men and women, and it draws a sharp contrast. So this is in James 3. I would love for someone to read James 3:13 through 18.
I can do
I
it.
haven't read James in a minute.
James is after Hebrews.
Yeah, I was like, where is it? New Testament or Old Testament?
New.
Yeah. What was the verses again?
I put in the chat.
James 3:13 to 18.
Hebrews and Hebrews, Grace.
That sounds like that's the rules.
Is Christian reading it or is Kristen reading it?
Go ahead, Kristen.
I'll
You
read
got
it.
it.
Who's crying?
Callie, she went back to the
Oh,
closet.
okay. Okay. So the header says, live well, live wisely. Do you want to be counted wise to build a reputation for wisdom? Here's what you do. Live well, live wisely, live humbly. It's the way you live, not the way you talk, that counts. Mean-spirited ambition isn't wisdom. Boasting that you are wise is not wisdom. Twisting the truth to make yourself sound wise isn't wisdom. It's the furthest thing from wisdom. It's animal cunning, devilish conniving. Whenever you're trying to look better than others or get the better of others, things fall apart and everyone ends up at the other's throat. Real wisdom, God's wisdom, begins with a holy life and is characterized by getting along with others. It is gentle and reasonable, overflowing with mercy and blessings, not hot one day and cold the next, not two-faced. You can develop a healthy, robust community that lives right with God and enjoy its results only if you do the hard work of getting along with each other, treating each other with dignity and honor.
Nice. Nice. The message is interesting because at times I'm like, are we even reading the same verse? But other times it's it offers, you know, kind of a helpful, you know, new way of seeing it. So Chris, what version do you have?
New American Standard.
Cool. Let's hear it in your version as well.
It says, who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good behavior his deeds in the gentleness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant or lie against the truth. This wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder in every evil thing. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy. And the seed whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace.
Awesome. So as you guys, you know, may have noticed there, again, the language that is used very specifically draws a contrast. The wisdom that is from above and wisdom that is not from above, right? And the words are intense. The words are quite strong, earthly, natural, demonic, right? And the hinge point that he hangs all of it on is, at least in the ESV, is jealousy and selfish ambition. Jealousy and selfish ambition defines, great to have you, Lisa. Have a good rest of your day. Jealousy and selfish ambition define the wisdom from below, and things that are pure, peaceable, gentle, open to reason, all the other good stuff, that defines from above. And this relates to manhood, right? Because think how often, you know, we've seen men act, you know, like peacocks and fighting with one another and just having this intense ambition, rooted in selfishness, right? To get ahead and make a name for themselves and all that stuff. And the world calls that good. A lot of times calls that what a man is. Joe, it was awesome to have you, brother. Thanks so much for being here.
Bless you
Appreciate
guys
your
too.
insights. Bless you too.
See you.
But that's not godly wisdom. It's not godly masculinity. So is there anything else that stands out to you guys about this passage?
Well, I think the reason why, one of the reasons why people think that is because people still relate us to animals and think that we're animals. And so like when we puff up our chest, they think it's like us showing our dominance among people, and that we're not related to animals. And we know that as a church family and stuff like that, but the world doesn't know that. So that's why I think that's why the world sees that as being good.
Good point.
That is a good point. I appreciate that.
Well, I mean, also in general, I always like for the distinction to be highlighted between worldly wisdom and godly wisdom. It's not the same thing now. The wisdom we get from the Bible, it's not the same thing as the wisdom we get from the world. It's very, it's very different actually. Look, I'm going to leave this place right now. I just wanted to show you guys something. This is a 9/11 memorial
Oh, nice.
here.
It's cool.
This is the highest place on the eastern seaboard. Okay. Oh, you can't see it, but over there is the New York City skyline. It's about 20 miles away, but very visible. It's like right now, you can see the Empire State Building, Freedom Tower. You would have been able to see the Twin Towers. This here is from the World Trade Center. Did you see that? That metal, yeah. And you got the flag here.
That's awesome.
And eagle, right? Can you see the eagle? Yeah. Anyway, sorry, just wanted to throw that out because I'm walking. I'm leaving this spot right now.
No,
sorry.
You're
anyway,
fine.
Go
I
ahead.
appreciate that, Declan. Now we've covered a lot of ground here, guys. I have two more just short passages I'd like to touch on, just because they bring up a couple things about masculinity, and then we can kind of move on maybe to relationships if we want to talk a little bit about that, and then we can wrap it up. But Janet, could you read 1 Timothy 4:12? And Gracie, could you read 1 Corinthians 16:13-14?
Yes.
First Timothy 4:12.
Yes.
Do not let anyone look down on you because you are young, but be an example for the believers in your speech, your conduct, your love, faith, and purity. That's a good one.
Yeah. So again, like I said earlier, Timothy, both books of Timothy are powerful because this is an older man of God giving advice to a younger man of God. And a lot of it is, some of it's related to kind of church administration and so forth, but a lot of it is very personal advice to him, and so speech, conduct, love, faith, purity, those are some big areas that define, how a man reveals himself to be a man of God. So that's worth noting there. Gracie, what does yours say?
1 Corinthians 16:13-14. Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong, do everything in love.
That's NIV, right?
Yes.
Katie, do you have your ESV open?
You're
I think
muted,
you're
though,
muted.
Katie.
I do.
Can you read your ESV, 1 Corinthians 16:13-14?
1 Corinthians. Sorry, I had it open to Timothy.
Yeah, no worries.
1 Corinthians 13 to where?
Verse 13 and verse 14
Of chapter 16.
of chapter 16.
Okay, thank you. Be watchful, stand firm in faith, and act like men. Be strong. Let all that you do be done in love.
Yeah.
Act like men.
Yeah, your NIV let us down there, Gracie. Your NIV pulled out the act like men section.
They're like, women can be strong and courageous too.
No, I mean, we laugh, but I mean, that actually was probably the
Part of the
translators, the reason that they pulled it out, because they didn't want to imply that women can't. Anyway, so that brings up a point that I wanted to hit on is strong. Act like men, be strong. Strength. What does it mean for a man to be strong, like biblically?
Be wise.
Wisdom, absolutely.
I think to stand on your principles, you know, to keep hold of your principles no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Bible says that wisdom only comes from God. So I wonder if anything else, even of the world, is even wise, you know?
There's a thought.
Yeah.
There's a thought. Yeah, no, I ask about strength because that's another one that the world would say, oh, a man should be strong, right? And that often bleeds over into some other areas that are not necessarily biblical, like it means not showing emotion, and it means this kind of macho thing where you stand up for yourself.
Men don't cry.
Yeah, and you don't. I'm not going to let anybody talk to me that way, and so like the strength aspect gets perverted by the world.
I'll point out that Jesus wept. Jesus
Thank you.
wept.
Shortest verse in the Bible.
Yeah. I mean, it does definitely. You're absolutely right, Skylar. I mean, for men, I don't know if it's the same for women. I kind of don't think it is. By the way, Gracie, I never thought of women as being weak or non-courageous. I know a lot. You make a valid point. A lot of men do. You're absolutely correct, and you make a valid point. But some of us have never made that mistake. We know otherwise. I just wanted to say that. But but the whole I mean, it's very pervasive in our culture that, like you said before, Skylar, no one's going to talk to me that way. You know, who are you talking to? You talking to me? You don't talk. You know that kind of. I mean, I mean, it's men, and you get it in movies and everything too. I mean, when we watch movies, it's always about the man beating the hell out of somebody else, killing them, and revenge. You know, it's never about, oh, you know, oh, it's okay, I understand. You know, it's all revenge and, you know, killing and you know, it really is perverted in the world. The message, and it's you know, it's bad because that's the message that's going out to young men, not the one that we're talking about. You know.
Yep.
You know, that perverted message of strength. That's the one that's getting the airtime. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. And that's why it's so important for us to loop all of this back to the archetype, the chief cornerstone, right? To Jesus, and say, was Jesus weak? Was he a doormat? Was he a wuss? No, he was very, very strong, right? He was the strongest of all, right? And yet he displayed his strength in ways that are very different than what the world would say, right? He displayed his strength in knowing which battles to fight. He displayed his strength in a tender word to this person and a strong word to that person. He displayed his strength in you know, turning the other cheek when the council, you know, interrogated him and slapped him across the face, and like that's not the time to fight there, right? He showed his strength when he burst out of the empty tomb, right? So he definitely was not a pushover, but he had the perspective and the discernment to know, this is my mission. I'm not going to get distracted with these peripheral squabbles where somebody is trying to get a rise out of me. That's not my game. I know what my mission is, you know? So
yeah, I mean, it's very important for me, like the way I understand things anyway, is in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prayed, perhaps this cup can pass me by. In other words, this particular destiny that he knew was about to happen, perhaps it could be sidestepped. And he understood that it wasn't to be sidestepped, but he could have sidestepped it, and he could have raised all kind of hell and fought back and all, but he didn't. He didn't. What I'm saying is, he did not have to be crucified in the sense that he was someone who could have made a choice. Do you see what I'm saying? But he chose the way of the what's the word, unworldly way of doing what he needed to do, not beating the hell out of everybody and raising an army and getting out of the situation, but he did which he could have done, I believe, but he went through and fulfilled his destiny, the way that we know.
What comes to my mind too is when he says when somebody slaps you, give him the other cheek. It reminds me of King David too, because King David never killed anybody unless it was ordained by God. And like when somebody else killed somebody that wasn't ordained by God, that he predicted wasn't or whatever, then he was upset about that. And so that's a man of faith too, especially when Saul was after him, trying to kill him for years and stuff like that. He had the chance to kill Saul, and he didn't even kill him. He showed him mercy. I think that's what made David, one of the reasons that made David a man after God's own heart.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Well, that is pretty much what I have as far as the the biblical. Obviously, there's more. We could go on and on and on, but those are the main verses that I wanted to focus on. And really, the huge theme of the day is Jesus, right? He's the model. He's the image. We're made in God's image. Jesus is the fullness of that image embodied in human form. And when we want to know, what does it look like to be a real man? What does it look like to represent the image of God? It's him. And we made this list of attributes, which is not an all-encompassing list. It's just our 10-minute discussion of it that captures some of that. And so, when it comes to relationships and family dynamics and any kind of interactions, it's really important to ask that, for us men, to ask ourselves, what does Jesus look like? What does the characteristics of Christ look like in this dynamic, in this romantic endeavor, in this family situation? And and ladies, what does Christ look like? What am I looking for in a man? And this doesn't just mean if you're single and looking for somebody. This can also mean in your family or in the relationship that you have. And it brings up a good question, both for men and women, which I guess we can kind of close on this particular question, which is, what do we do when we see space between who we feel like we are and the standard that we see in Scripture, right? So men, how do we respond to that? How do we grapple with the space between that? And ladies, if you think, okay, now I have an idea in my head of what this man of God should look like, and yet the man in my life or the men in my life are not living up to that, right? How do we help ourselves or help one another to better reflect that?
Well, you should definitely criticize them and point out all of their flaws and how they're doing everything terrible to make them feel really motivated to do better. I find
Nagging.
that's generally the best approach.
Absolutely, nagging for sure.
Well, Skylar, in myself, I mean, I think sometimes it's okay if I don't meet the standard, as long as I am, striving for it and making an effort, to keep trying at least. And I agree, Jesus is the perfect archetype. I'm not going to get it right every time, but at least if he is my goal, when I do fall short, at least I'm headed in the correct direction, to strive to do it,
Absolutely. So, Gracie, you know, you made a humorous joke there about what not to do, but in all seriousness, right? How would you help a man that you care about? It could be either a romantic endeavor or a platonic friendship, you know, and you recognize like, hey, this guy has like there's a growth area that you really sense God is calling him to step into. Like, how would you approach that?
Yeah, so like let's say the way that the guys, because there's often communication issues between guys and girls because they communicate differently. Be like, you know, sometimes they're just not aware. But like if someone says something that like feels hurtful to you, you know, just being like, hey, like when you say such and such, like it makes me feel this, and it gives them the opportunity. Not there's a difference between saying like you always make me feel like a terrible, like, you know, like an I statement versus a you did this statement. Be like, hey, I'm feeling this when this happens. It puts the ball into their court, so to speak, by leading with vulnerability rather than attacking. But when you like lead with vulnerability, it puts them into the position to be like, oh, hey, like I did this thing which made, you know, her feel this way, and like now I have the opportunity to fix it, right? So like putting the ball back into their court, so to speak. And because sometimes, I mean, because you can't fix a problem that you don't know exists, right? Like a lot of times, like my tendency is to like just not say anything and just keep quiet and like not actually share how like something makes me feel. But then if they don't know that, they can't do anything about it, right? So it's almost kind of like drawing out the nobility from them. So it's like giving them an opportunity to be a man by like saying like, hey, like it would really mean a lot to me if you could do this, you know, helping them see what you need so that they can actually fulfill that. I don't know if that made sense.
It makes absolute sense. I think it's a very good idea doing it that way. I like it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Skylar,
Awesome,
do you mind
guys.
sharing an example of like how things work badly, you know?
Well, sure, and I think I'm sure we all have experiences along those lines. But I mean, like, as a man, if a woman comes to me, you know, I'm in a relationship with her, and she, you know, has a list of all the things I'm doing wrong, and approaches me with, you know, a frustrated, you know, nagging kind of attitude. Like, I can be perfectly aware that she is correct, right? Like, you are correct about all these areas that I suck at, right? I can be aware of that. And yet, the way that she's approaching me really makes me not want to care or make any changes, right? It's like, and that's something I think that sometimes women, and this can go both ways, by the way. This could be a man to woman thing too. So this is not, can go both ways. Like the way that we approach someone can have the exact opposite of what we're trying to achieve, right? So that kind of nagging, harping on somebody, like you never do, blah blah blah, that type of mentality, it's completely self-defeating, because it doesn't encourage and motivate someone to actually rise up and become the person that you want them to be. So instead of
Can we
telling
do
someone
a
who
role
they're,
play,
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
please?
But I mean, but everything you guys are saying is perfect. I mean, but because when I've had women come to me with a whole list, I mean, I can't take it anymore. I just can't listen. I used to have it where I used to drive by my house and sit in the car for an hour listening to I was too afraid to go in the house. I had to sit in the car in the street. I could see my house over there. You understand? But I just didn't want to go in. I couldn't take it. I just listened to the radio. And you know, I had this feeling of impending doom that I had to go in the house eventually to sleep. I mean, it's terrible. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, Skylar,
So,
do a role play with me, please.
Okay, you want me to be negative?
Okay, we're gonna do
Awesome.
we're gonna do bad communication because you just keep not taking out the trash. Okay. I'll be the woman and you can be the man.
Okay. All right, fine. So you get to go first then.
So you're sitting on the couch watching TV.
Okay. All right.
Excuse me, The trash is full, and I asked you to take it out like 20 times already.
Okay, whatever. Look, listen, I'm watching the game right now. Like, can I get to it later?
You always say later. This is the third time I've asked you this week.
I really wish that you could just like give me a break and let me just relax for a little bit. Like, just got home from work.
Oh,
just chill?
I've been doing nothing all day. I've been taking care of the kids. I've been sweeping the floors. I've been cooking all the meals. You think I've been just relaxing all day? So when you come home, you don't do anything around here? Like, you never care about me or do anything around this house. Storms off, closes the door, slam.
Yeah, and
How-
then it's.
How motivated do you feel right now to go take out the trash?
I probably am like mentally even more checked out than I was before, and now I'm just gonna keep my butt glued to this couch and have like 4 beers and watch the game for the next 3 hours.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, new role play.
Yep.
Same situation, but good communication.
Okay.
So I have to
I think it was
channel.
back vacation when you said 20 times that you asked.
I just picked whatever number came to my mind.
20 times.
Okay, I have to channel my inner Proverbs 31 woman real quick. Hold on. Okay.
I love that passage.
Okay.
Can I do it?
Can
I do it?
Go for
You
it,
want to do it,
Katie.
Katie?
Go for it.
This is actually good. We should all do role plays. Go for it.
Wait, I just want to say, you know, I had a number of women would get mad with me. Let's say, okay, I put the milk back in the refrigerator with just a little bit inside, and for some reason that really pisses them off. Or I put the cookie bag back in the cupboard, but there's only one in there. I mean, I had this girl used to come to me with everything. You put what? You put the cookie in the bag. There's only one left, and there's only this much. But why do you always do that? You know, it gets so mad. There's for some reason it's a common theme actually.
I think you're right. Yeah, my mom used to do that.
Yeah. So let's see some good communication, Katie,
Yeah, what you got, Katie?
coming from a
Skye,
married
I know
woman.
you just I know you just came home from work and that you're probably tired, but I've been doing I had 3 appointments with the kids today. We went to soccer practice and I did the dishes and I went grocery shopping and I'm really burnt out right now. So on one of your commercial breaks, would you mind taking out the trash?
Yeah, I think I could do that. I appreciate all the work that you put in today. So yeah, definitely on the next break here, I'll grab the trash. Thanks so much for asking nicely.
Thank you. It'd mean a lot to me. And then I'm gonna grab a beer and sit down and join you and watch the game.
Awesome.
Hey.
There you go.
Hey.
Yeah.
Janet, do you want to take a stab so we can see how it's done like a pro?
I mean, done like a pro.
You're the group mom here.
You know, when you get a chance, could you take out the trash? I'm kind of busy with doing the dishes. That was always my thing, when you get a chance.
Yeah. That's nice because that implies that like it's something that's important to you, but you're not putting the pressure on the person to do it right
now.
that minute.
Right this second. The trash is gonna explode.
Yeah. So
Skylar taught me this one thing that I've started to try and incorporate into my communication, where it's like, you know, if a guy is married to you, it's probably because, you know, they like you on some level and care about how you feel. Right? So like, you know, your default assumption should be that like they care about you and then they care about how you feel, right? Rather than throwing it in their face that you don't care about me because you didn't take out the trash, and like attacking his character because you didn't do a thing, right? So like starting the conversation with like, you know, hey honey, you know, I know that you really care about how I feel and that like our relationship's really important to you, and like one of the ways that really makes me feel loved is when you help me, you know, so I don't feel like everything is on me all the time. So like it would make it mean so much to me if you could just, you know, take out the trash, you know, whenever you get a chance at the end of this commercial, you know, something like that, like encouraging him that you know his heart and like showing him how he can continue to show his heart to you, if that makes sense. And then
Yeah, that would really work well for me, Gracie. Just if someone came to me like that, That would just work wonders. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't, not even just the trash. I would do everything. I mean, you know,
Because it's coming
the
from
milk,
different
the cookies. You know, yeah.
it's coming from two different assumptions. The first assumption is like coming from the assumption that you don't care about me and you have to do all these things to prove that you care about me. Versus the second assumption is I assume that you do care about me and you do love me and you do value our relationship. And this would really, you know, mean a lot to me in this relationship if you were to do this thing to help me out. Like it's coming from two different like assumptions where one you feel attacked and one you feel validated. And then if all else fails, ladies, if all else fails, you can always say like, hey, you know, if you took out the trash, there's just no telling what I might do for you in return. Get a little all the
You
guys.
could always take out your own trash too.
Well, no, this is just assuming that there's shared duties and that's his job. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that one would work wonders. You know, promise of reward. Hey, it's
That might be
biblical.
toxic too, though.
Huh?
I said that might be toxic too, though.
I'm mostly kidding, but like, you know,
Yeah,
it's biblical.
'cause
Like
you gotta do that.
Ruth seduced Boaz into, you know, marrying her and getting that inheritance there. I mean, come on, she laid down at the dude's feet at night, like putting on her nice perfumes and nice dress and laid down at the end of his bed. Okay, like that was straight up seduction right there. Like, Boaz, I smell so lovely. You should marry
Damn,
me.
she putting in work.
Make me not a widow anymore.
No, but Gracie, it could backfire. You see, what I would do is I'd be bringing a whole bunch of trash in the house. I'd be putting it in there and emptying it every 5 minutes. We say, "Hey, what that? I just took the trash."
Why is there still trash? Oh, look at that.
Oh,
yeah, I just took it out again. Yeah.
it's like
That's awesome.
that's my joke for the day.
Well, let's close in prayer so that we can wrap up the recording and the streaming, and then if we want to continue chatting, we can do that. Gracie, would you like to close us in prayer?
Sure. Dear Father, thank you so much for all of the men in this group. It's been such a blessing to be able to interact with them and see like having a community and fellowship with like godly men. It's been really restorative to me as a woman to see that there are good men and to have this conversation about how we've perceived masculinity and like those different various struggles we've had and find common ground. I want to thank you for Skylar spearheading this and for all the comments and the contributions that everyone made. And I also thank you for sending Jesus for obviously many reasons, more than one, but also that he was able to show us like what real masculinity looks like, what was the original design, so we can see a clear example and not have to wonder what a man's supposed to look like. We don't have to go to the secular culture. We don't have to go to church culture to tell us what it is, because we see it perfectly embodied in the person of Jesus. So I just thank you for that gift as well. Yeah, and just, I pray that you'll be with each of us individually over the course of the week, so that we can be reunited next Friday when we meet again. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you guys for putting this together, Skylar, Gracie. I really appreciate it. It's very good for me. Very, very helpful. You know, lots to think about. Yeah. And I mean, and also it you see, like for me, I don't mind embracing my tenderness and my kindness now when I think of it in these terms. And you know, if I'm with a woman when I do that, if I'm with a woman who thinks I'm a wuss, then maybe I just need to keep it moving, and that's not the right woman for me. You know, instead of me getting rid of my tenderness and kindness, just keep my tenderness and kindness, but keep it moving and get into, you know, it's maybe not the right relationship, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely.